come from, we call that sexual abuse. You can pretty it up all you want to, Judge. This is what you said at Mr. Micah's sentencing. These are your words, not mine. What I can say, you said, you have more sympathy for the criminal than the victim, don't you?
Senator, I worked on behalf of victims of crime zealously as a prosecutor. As a judge, I listened carefully to understand impact on victims, and I have always take that into account.
Do you know Micah Smith?
Michael Smith, Senator?
Micah, M-I-C-H.
I don't believe I know a Micah Smith, Senator, no.
Okay. I bet the victims of Micah Smith remember Micah Smith if you don't.
Senator, there was a defendant I sentenced named Michael Smith.
Mr. Smith molested a 4-year-old girl, didn't he?
Senator, he was convicted after trial of unlawful sexual contact under Maine law.
That's a nice way of putting it.
That was the charge, Senator.
Right. Mr. Smith molested a 9-year-old girl, didn't he?
Senator, again, he was convicted of unlawful sexual contact against 2 children. In that case, I did impose the sentence the state requested.
At oral argument, this is how Mr. Smith's conduct was described. Quote, you heard this testimony. All of the abuse is done in the same fashion. Smith would rub his fingers in a circular motion on the vagina of each child, and he did so repeatedly. Now, where I come from, we call that sexual abuse. You can pretty it up all you want to, Judge. This is what you said at Mr. Micah's sentencing. These are your words, not mine. What I can say, you said, is that this is a very tragic situation of a person who has a lot of good in him, having done a very reprehensible thing to 2 young children causing extreme damage. Did I read that correctly?
Senator, in that case, I imposed the sentence the state requested.
Did I read your quotation correctly?
Senator, that I think is a portion of what I said at sentencing. My focus was on...
But the words I read, are they correct?
That's what was reported in the paper, Senator. I have not seen a transcript of the sentencing.
I bet the victims remember, Judge. You might have forgotten, just like you forgot his name, but I bet the victims remember. And then you handed down a sentence. You gave Mr. Smith 12 years, but you suspended 6 of them, didn't you?
Senator, that was at the recommendation of the state because
but it was your ruling. Is that an accurate statement of your ruling?
Senator, I accepted the state's recommendation that 6 years should be suspended so that Mr. Smith would be required to participate in sex offender treatment.
I appreciate the lengthy explanation, but I think it's a pretty simple question. That was your sentence, right?
Yes, I imposed the sentence the state requested in that case.
Are you familiar with the Bangor Daily News?
I am the Bangor Daily News, Senator.
Right. Did you read the article they wrote, quote, light sentences send a message that domestic violence does not matter, end quote. You remember that article?
I have read it, Senator. I believe it mischaracterizes a case that is described.
That article was about you, wasn't it?
My recollection, Senator, is that it described several different cases. The case that I worked on that was described there, the defendant in that case was acquitted by a jury of the most serious conduct, and that was not reflected in that article. And so
the newspaper got it wrong.
That was an op-ed that I believe misunderstood what happened, which is the jury acquitted the defendant of the most serious conduct that he was charged with. I was not the fact finder in that case, and so at sentencing I was bound by the jury's verdict.
Let me ask you, I'm going to run out of time here. I wish I had more time for you, Ms. Campbell, but I've seen a lot of activist judges, and I'm not saying you're the most activist, but the list you're on, it sure doesn't take long to call the roll. Let me finish with this question. I'm going to end as I began, Judge Lopez. You have more sympathy for criminals than victims, don't you?
Senator, I have the support of the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence and the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I believe that support is a reflection of the work I did as a prosecutor, as well as the care I take with cases involving victims as a judge.
You're embarrassed to answer my question, aren't you?
Thank you to the nominees for being here. I'm sorry that I was unable to preside, but in the capable hands of my colleague, Peter Welch. Judge Lopez.
What we just witnessed was one of the most naked collisions of political moral architecture this Congress has produced in years. Because this moment between Stacey Plaskett and Jim Jordan was not about who scored the clever line first. It was not about the cameras. It was not about personalities. It was about narrative control. It was about who gets to define what reality even is. It was about who decides what the American public is allowed to see, and who decides what they must never see. And when Plaskett said that the witnesses before them pose a direct threat to people who oppose them, and when she framed transparency itself as a public danger, Jordan snapped back violently, because in that instant the stakes of the entire hearing changed. When a member of Congress declares that journalists simply showing video footage is a threat, the system has already drifted into a new category of power. Because then the real fight is not over interpretation. The real fight is over the raw right of the American people to witness reality unfiltered. Jordan didn't explode because of volume. He exploded because Plaskett revealed the true dividing line. One faction believes certain footage should never see daylight. One faction believes the public should see every frame. This is existential. This is foundational. Because transparency is not entertainment. Transparency is obligation. Transparency is what keeps the press from becoming a designated state narrative ministry. This moment on January 6th, the surveillance video, is not about Tucker Carlson. It is not about who you like or don't. It is about whether the country's citizens are supposed to be protected from seeing what happened, or whether they are allowed to confront it all directly. 41,000 hours. That number hung in the air like a gravity field. Plaskett framed disclosure itself as danger. Jordan framed concealment itself as danger. These two visions cannot coexist peacefully. This is not about left versus right. This is about power versus accountability. This is about whether the American public is the consumer of government narrative or the sovereign judge that the government must answer to. Jordan then pointed to the FTC letter, naming journalists personally. This is where the moment turned cold, because when the enforcement infrastructure of the executive branch begins to name specific journalists, that is no longer disagreement. That is power-targeting speech. And Jordan's rage in that instant was not performance. It was fear of what that precedent means. If naming the journalists becomes normal, if labeling disclosure as threat becomes normalized, we are entering a structure where the government itself becomes the editor of permitted truth. This is what this channel exists to expose, because this hearing wasn't about what happened in 2021. It was about what rules of reality will govern 2026, 2028, every election from here forward. Plaskett said giving this video to a biased talking head was rewriting the event. Jordan said refusing the public access to the raw footage was rewriting the event. That is the entire philosophical divide in American politics, condensed to a blade point. Whether the public can handle seeing unapproved narrative, whether the truth belongs to the government or whether the truth belongs to the governed. This is where democracy lives or dies, not in who gets indicted next, not in who wins the next midterm, but whether the people have the right to see for themselves what their government sees. This is why this moment matters. because this hearing exposed something deeper than disagreement. It exposed that some believe transparency is a threat to stability, while others believe transparency is the only thing that maintains legitimacy. History is not going to remember the clever insults. History is going to remember who tried to stop the tapes from ever being seen. Because once you classify knowledge itself as a weapon, you justify unlimited censorship to protect the narrative. And when that happens, the constitutional immune system collapses. Democracy without transparency is not democracy. It is theater. And this moment, these seconds between Plaskett and Jordan, this was the warning siren. This is where the future path forks. One path demands sunlight, the other demands silence. One recognizes that truth can be chaotic but redeeming. The other demands the public be shielded from reality because reality is inconvenient to authority. This hearing tells us which direction those in power are instinctively leaning. This is not spectacle. This is the central defining battle of American self-governance in the 21st century, whether the state controls narrative or whether the people witness truth and judge for themselves. This channel exists so no one forgets moments like this. This channel exists to preserve the moral record of power in real time. This channel exists because sunlight is not optional. It is the last defense left. Subscribe to the Congress Brief.